Hello and welcome to Consolation League. I'm one of your hosts, Scott.
Paul.
And today we've got one of the nicest guys in 40K in the area joining us. And he happens to be, as Paul and I were saying before this, one of the guys that wouldn't be in the Consolation League at all. In fact, he blows it well out of the water. Brian, thank you for joining us.
Hey,
Thanks a
my
lot,
pleasure,
Brian.
guys. Yeah, no, happy to come on. There's honestly, you guys, it's super cool that you started your podcast. You like wherever you're playing in this game, it's just such a fun game, and the social aspect of it, like the
Yeah,
ability to connect with many different people wherever they live across the province. It's awesome. It's such
yeah,
a fun game. And then, this the fact that look, this is a 3D chess game where we
Yeah.
get to play with the models about all these cool stories that we read about.
yeah,
It's pretty cool.
It
We're all
is.
big kids, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Definitely. Just getting to play with toys again. It's just a lot
yeah.
of fun. The
Little
it
RV
strategic
is.
figures.
element.
It is. Well, it's strategic. Like we're doing something
Yeah,
Mhm.
fancy here, but
yeah. There's some
we're,
thinking going
Yeah.
on.
we're measuring. But my tank is going
Yeah,
up here and going pew pew pew.
yeah. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah,
100%.
for sure. I'm a big fan of your podcast. Actually, it was Scott that put me on to the other guys, 40K, and that really, I have to say, encouraged me to start thinking about competitive play. Just
Oh,
listening to you
awesome.
and Davey break down your matches and just the analysis, it really opened my eyes to like, oh, you know what? I can have a lot more fun at the tournaments by turning my mind a bit more to
Mhm.
it. And that's
Oh,
certainly been my experience just learning from you guys and the way you've been playing and the way you describe your matches. It's been great.
Yeah, it was really awesome. I met Brian at, I think, the very first tournament I ever played at Critical Hit, or just in general, outside of that, maybe that one in Kingston. I came down, I think, the next weekend or something, and I signed up
Mhm.
and got into it. And you were really welcoming. You gave me some great compliments on my Imperial Fists. Um, and then I tuned into the podcast, and yeah, it was just like, okay, this guy gets it, and he's making this kind of
Yeah.
easily consumable, and the excitement's there, and yeah, it was so amazing. So a big
Yeah.
thank you to you for making it. We talk about, just get out there, have fun, play the game.
Hmm.
But when you've got opponents or people that are cheering for you on the other side of the table that aren't just looking to destroy you
Yeah.
completely, it really makes it a lot more fun. It
Yeah.
it
turns it into a game instead of just a
Mm.
showdown type of
Or
thing.
yeah, for
It
sure.
does. It's a total social contract. The game it is really not fun if you are just hammering your opponent.
Hmm.
And if you like, if you can finish every game and win by 1 point,
Hmm.
or by, whether it's WTC scoring or whatever, that's the ideal for me because it's a blast. Like I've look, I've cheered for opponents who end up beat me at the end of a game
Hmm.
because something wild happened. I'm like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like Davey says, look, we're playing with our toy soldiers.
Yeah.
You can't get too worked up about it, whether winning or losing, whatever. But it's the only to me, it's the only way to play it is to have fun, engage
Hmm.
your community, engage your opponent. And Davey's an awesome example about going up beyond just playing the game. Like Davey does a ton of TOing. He got involved with GTA 40K. TOing is like the ultimate thankless job because
Hmm.
you're not playing, you're just hanging out, you're organizing a tournament for others to play.
Mhm.
Right.
Um, and then you're settling disputes amongst rules. And Davey does it honestly. You guys, I know you wanted to. Sometimes it can be unwieldy with two folks popping in with their opinions, but you guys have to chat with Davey because he is a fucking riot when it comes to hearing the stories about like TO stuff. Like he has this. He's TOing a Toronto tournament. I won't do it justice, but he walks by a table and he heard the guy goes, "Well, how can I hit you on Overwatch with a 7?" And it was like he's like, "What? Hold on, what just happened here?" Like So anyways, but Davey's a prime example of someone where you play the game. Not only is it
Mhm.
fun, but then he's going above and beyond going, well, look, I'm going to engage the community. I'm going to organize tournaments. Him and another great buddy, his and also a buddy of mine, Carlos,
Mhm.
they tag team and run these RTTs in Toronto, usually at the Guild House. If you guys, I mean, I know it's a trek and they just
Yeah.
sell out in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
But you know, you're basically donating your day for
Mhm.
nothing so
Yeah.
people can play 40K. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate selfless act. And you know, and frankly, the pod, as much as you know, you guys now see like,
Mhm.
hey, there's a bit of work involved, you
Mhm.
get to do your research and what have you. I can't think of a more fun couple hours than just sitting down with Davey and talking about this stuff. We both came into this game, you know, playing competitively, but understanding that like there is a great big divide between someone who's played this for a while and someone coming in. And,
Mhm.
you know, hey, you just go and you get your ass kicked and
Mhm.
whatever and try to improve.
Yeah.
Um, and if you improve, great. But as we've started our pod and chatted about it, we just wanted to basically engage a community and say, look, from our mid-table perspective, which even when we have success, it's still like, you know, we're not going to world championships like uh okay,
Well, hang on a
whatever.
second.
So
Someone,
sure. That was
I'm pretty sure
I
there's a guy in this chat right
I
now who's
I
going to Atlanta on a
I
golden
like
ticket. What's his
yeah.
name again?
So that aside, Davey could very much, he was this close to getting one even before that. I guess it meant like we're not playing on like Team Canada,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or
Okay.
whatever. And we're not, I mean, you're, you know, plugged in that way. Um, Actually, I do think Davey has a chance of making Team Scotland because they need a Grey Knights player and he is that good.
Nice.
That'd be
Nice.
So
amazing.
I'm really trying to push him
Yeah.
because he just TOs too much. If he got to play a bit more, frankly, he would already have a golden ticket.
Yeah.
He became within a hair's breadth of one at the Barry Bash, finishing not only extremely high, but
Mhm.
potentially winning best overall.
Mhm.
Okay.
Best overall ended up being won by someone because it's like paint score and your placing. And
Yeah.
best overall ended
Oh.
up being won by someone with a commission painted army. So I don't know how that works. Yeah, I'm like,
Oh.
boo,
Boo.
boo.
That's
Boo.
not fair.
So I think if maybe
Uh,
that was known, maybe that wouldn't have happened, and Davey would have a golden ticket like three
right.
months ago.
Oh.
So I don't know. There's still a chance, who knows? But the point is like just, you know, chatting away like you guys in the pod,
Mhm.
chatting about it on a non-assumptive way. Like, you
Mhm.
know, you can listen to other content creators and you hear them kind of sometimes use lingo or say things that
Mhm.
sound a little bit assumptuous. And I don't know, like, you know, maybe the old man in me, I'm like, that sounds a little bit obnoxious.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
but just being able to explain it, say like, I have no idea what this guy did, and I learned like this thing gets to
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
this, and you explain it in the pod, and you have a blast,
Mhm.
and the reaction's been pretty good. And I'm look, listening to you guys, listen to every one of your pods. It's been excellent, man. Like it's great to
Thank you.
listen to a
Thank you.
couple
Really
guys chatting
appreciate it.
away. It's
Yeah.
yeah, keep plugging at her, right? So
Well, that was that. I mean, that's definitely been the inspiration from your pod, but it was one of those
Mm.
things where Paul and I were like, let's just sit down and chat. Let's just
Yeah.
talk about what's working, what's not working, and the rules we
Mhm.
get wrong, and sometimes the rules we get right.
and chatting about it makes you a better player too, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
honestly, that discussion of it, like
Yeah.
um just being able to sit there and go, oh yeah, you know, and then like you can do it obviously in side chats and your little
Yeah.
Discord
Mhm.
groups and all that stuff, but being able to sit there and just think about what you're saying and talk
Mhm.
about it in a meaningful manner, and you put your mind into it, and then next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm just a little bit better next game, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys have kind of felt that. Do you listen to a lot of other like content creators? Because I actually honestly find there are times when I'm looking for just people, normal folks to chat about 40K that I want to listen on a car ride or
Mhm.
walk with my dog or whatever. And there's not always a ton out there.
I'm not finding
So
a lot
No.
either. The big ones or the ones that I hear are mostly the big channels,
right, yeah,
the
Yeah.
the big
Vanguard
guys,
the
tactics.
vanguards, the tabletop,
yeah,
the mini wargaming stuff, like all those guys. They've got great content, but
Mm.
they've been playing for a while and they know what they're doing, and like they don't ever look like they go back and like, well, let me look at my data sheet for a second because I have to double check if I
Yeah.
am I right on this throw? Am I right on this roll? Oh no, I got this thing wrong. Like there's not a lot of guys that are like that from what I've been able to see either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
No. Or there's sometimes they're kind of, you know, humorless might be a little harsh, but like they're just often maybe too serious about it.
yeah.
Without that, like, I don't think these guys are playing the same game I'm playing.
Yeah,
You know
I'm
what I
Yeah.
playing
mean?
little
Like,
plastic figures. I think they're playing with
yeah.
real drones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Big
It's
time.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So that's
So
great. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
what got you into Warhammer, Brian? When did you start playing?
Um, in high school, so I certainly grew up although I like my sports, I also like my nerdy stuff, you know, Transformers and sci-fi stuff and the lore and fantasy, but I definitely lean more towards laser beams and pew pew
Mhm.
than swords and shields and dragons and stuff. So my brother Callum had I generally worked in a comic shop when I was in high school,
Cool.
and throughout university. My brother did as well. Now he has a little chain of comic shops called Strange Adventures. They're based out in the Maritimes.
Awesome.
But
Cool.
he's always one of those older brothers that like always gets something cool, right? And always kind of, you know, and I was living out in Nova Scotia and in a small town, and he was in Halifax, and he gave me this book called Rogue Trader. It was
Mhm.
kind of beat up. I'm like, oh, cool. It's like a role-playing game, right? And I'd played a few other role-playing games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, Robotech and Rifts and like Palladium games and things like that. Um, Acts and Allies, you know, all like
Mhm.
good board games, that like that kind of stuff, Risk. But he gives me this Rogue Trader book, and I'm like, this is wild. Like all the rules, because it was meant as a bit of a role-playing game, but it was a like tabletop skirmish game. Just this weird, bizarre shit that uh, like the rules are crazy. And like it is fundamentally 40K, but it was definitely more skirmish game. But it was a treasure trove of cool sci-fi stories and the kind of like nebulous, it's like 70s, right?
Mhm.
Nebulous sort of 40K story, you know, about the emperor, and like the artwork is wild. And I'm like, this is cool. And I remember second edition came out and it was this cool box set, and you got like a so it was like maybe me in grade 11 and grade 12, you know, playing a little bit of 40K with this Rogue Trader. Then second edition came out and it's like a big box, and it had a red Space Marine with his, you know, arms akimbo, and you got some plastic Space Marines, some plastic orcs. It's funny, you got an orc dreadnought that was cardboard. It's just piece of cardboard you put in a little, like, oh, there's your Orc Dreadnought. And everything had templates. So if you had a flamer, you'd put a template down or whatever. Played that for a bit. And I think third edition eventually came out, but um, you know, it was a, like actually pretty fun thing I started doing in high school and enjoying it. Went to university, played with a buddy for a couple of years, but you go to
Mhm.
university and it's like,
Yeah,
you know,
it's a
I was,
different world.
yeah, you know, you're partying, you're having a good
Mhm.
time, and you know, you rather, although there are some weekends and weeknights, you know, staying in and playing 40K was better, but a lot of other times the beers and the parties were a little bit more
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And so I stopped, even though me and a buddy, good pal Colin, played for a few years at university. We this really great collection. He was an amazing artist. We stopped. Necrons were just coming out. Like, oh,
Mhm.
and they were
Oh,
basically like
cool.
Terminators. Like, oh,
Yeah.
look at this dumb Terminator. We're like, oh, they're clearly just Terminators, right? You know, these so the Necron, they had like maybe three models. They came out like the basic Necron guy, and then there's like you know, a Lord, and then maybe a little vehicle. Um, so it was, you know, we stopped, and that's what, second, third year university. Then like fast forward, I don't know, 25 years, and COVID was on.
Mm.
And me and Davey, who is actually the brains and the beauty behind the other guy's 40K, because he does everything. I just get to go on there and ramble. Um, we we were at rugby practice because that's where Davey and I met. He was a guy from Scotland that came over here to Toronto, and Buddy brought him over, played rugby with my club. Instantly, like, great dude. And I knew he was different because his first weekend here, he went and played in a Twilight Imperium tournament instead of like going out in the piss. And he was like a very good athlete, like a really high level rugby player. And I'm like, oh, this guy's probably gonna be a party animal too. He's like, no, I'm going to this Twilight Imperium. It's like a big, like a super nerd board game where you gotta, and he won it on top of it because he's the friggin' strategic genius. He wins this thing. I'm like, that's what you did your first. Yeah, he's like, yeah, great. Found it online, went and played it.
Yeah.
So, I became fast friends with him. A couple other guys on the rugby team, we became fast friends. A couple years later, COVID hits.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were still going down to rugby practice, but you couldn't, do anything. You're basically playing tag with pool noodles. Like it was, that's what you're doing, right?
Right.
And lots of time. They had a lot of time in their hands. And I'd always walked by a Games Workshop store and you look at the painted models like, oh, that's cool. And I still kind of like kept up with the lore, but like largely disconnected from 40K. And but it was still like I had a soft spot for it. And I heard my Davey and another buddy of ours, Kyle, and we call him Watsy. And Watsy's actually played in a couple tournaments with us. I heard them say something, something, something Space Marine, and my ears perked up. And I'm like, what do you mean Space Marine? They go, oh, we're getting armies together. We're gonna play a game soon. And I'm like, what? You guys play Warhammer 40,000? Like, yeah. Like, what? Like, I've known you guys for years, and it is not something you do bring up.
No.
And I'm like, right? Like, yeah, generally.
It's not often advertised.
No, especially on a rugby team, right?
Not in a rugby team, no.
Getting loaded.
Flow in the conversation.
Oh no. You play this tabletop game? So anyways, I heard that, and a week later I'm like, work was suspended. I'm a lawyer, so it meant that you're not going to courts or anything like that. You can do some stuff from home, but a lot of downtime. I went to a Games Workshop because you could still do a little bit of shopping. Bought an Orcs book, or sorry, an Orcs Combat Patrol. I think I bought Gazcool. I bought some paints and brushes, and I just hammered into it. And because of COVID, everyone's just talking on their chat and doing whatever and sending each other updates. And for a couple months, it's all I did was assemble models, paint, send pictures to each other. And then we started playing some games. Then Davey and I, went to our first competitive tournament, and, the rest is history. We've been playing like madmen since then.
That's fantastic. That's
great.
Amazing.
Oh, good fun. I got some funny, like, man, you play in a league, some of the funny shit that happens in there. It is priceless. It's so funny when you look back at, like, I remember my first league game and getting my butt kicked by literally losing like 100-20, and and now I'm fast friends with that guy, and we look back and laugh. I go, I had no idea what I was doing, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
So was Orcs your first army? Like that? You were into Orcs from high school on?
Orcs were like, look, I'm a big Chaos guy. And I remember having Karn the Betrayer, painting him back in, 25 years ago. So I was buying Orcs, building up an Orc army, like, real fun, like just melee combat. Gazcool Thrak is this big beast, and you just throw a bunch of stuff on the board, see how it goes. 9th edition Orcs had Here We Go, where you get to reroll all their charge rolls, and they're pretty good. And I remember buying some NID models and kind of putting them aside, saying, hey, maybe that'll be another army. And then you start to look on like Facebook and eBay and CNA, maybe there's some cheap Warhammer 40,000. And someone was selling a lot of like just a grab bag of Chaos Space Marine stuff. And it had the old, like really old, they look so small, Space Marine guys, but there was like a metal Karn in there, like not the new one, but the old one where he has his two hands up. There was a Defiler in there, Rhino, something else, and I got one like $80 for it. I'm like, cool.
Right.
As soon as I got it and I read the rules about World Eater Berserkers, where they got to fight twice in 9th edition. Now, Chaos Space Marines only had one wound. All other Space Marines had 2 wounds. Chaos Space Marines only had 1 wound.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, this Chaos Space Marines, this is awesome. And then I haven't looked back. Generally, even though I'll play orcs or I'll play demons or sometimes Chaos Knights, or I'll fool around with some Space Marine stuff.
Mhm.
Orcs are obviously fun, but Chaos Space Marines are really my love. They're my passion. I haven't
Nice.
looked back. It's been so fun. So what do you mean? Look, I know what you guys play, but generally, have you started to like, I know we got Votan, we got Black Templars. Have you guys started to
Mhm.
expand into other armies? Because it's hard not to, right?
Well, that was the thing with me. I expanded too far too quickly. So I've got a bit of my first army I started to collect was Chaos Space Marines.
Awesome.
Just draw. I love the look of them. 80s heavy metal album style warrior guys like
Big
sucked
time.
me in right away. And then saw the Death Guard Combat Patrol in ninth and bought that right away because I was like, these look amazing, and had a blast painting them. And then it was just like, there was a point where I was just grabbing the latest thing, the
Yeah.
newest shiny thing, and now I've calmed down a bit. But having said that, I probably have, oh, I've got Necrons 2,000 points. I'll be playing them Saturday.
Nice.
I've got Black Templars 2,000 points. Dark Angels, I'm still working on, but I'm close to having 2,000 points of them.
Very cool.
And yeah, and then I have a Chaos Space Marine list that I really like the Deceptors list just because I
Yeah.
like that dynamic. It's very
Oh yeah.
fun, and I
Very
like
cool.
painting Alpha Legion. So
Great lore
yeah,
too, eh?
great lore. The lore of the, are they good guys in disguise? Are they bad
Mhm.
guys? Just
They're bad
straight up,
guys.
they're bad guys.
Chaos.
They're bad
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, no. Yeah, so that's where I'm kind of at.
Yeah, I've
Scott, are you
got
just on the two fists, Imperial fists, and Votan, or
right now I'm on the two. I've
cool?
got some unbuilt Gene Stealer cult that
Oh,
I'm
here we go.
contemplating. I've got
Next
some,
points break. I swear to God, they're going to get a huge point break and maybe a rule change, even though it says,
yeah,
and all of a sudden they might go from worst to best. You'll see.
I really like the lore behind them. I think it's a creepy, strange, just completely
Yeah.
perverse lore that they've got.
Have you ever watched the Hammer and Bolter series on
Yeah,
Warhammer?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
So
that's
cool.
incredible! So
Yeah.
cool.
yeah. So they've got some really cool stuff. So I'm really tempted to start an army of them because I've got like an aberrant, a few the abominants and some aberrants and things like that. And I've got some gene stealers themselves because I've also got a few Tyranids. So that's another thing where I'm like, the Tyranids. I'm a big fan of Alien, the Alien franchise. I can't get
Yeah.
like you throw a xenomorph at me and I'm like, okay, I'll take one of those.
Yep. Yep.
So they're kind of another one that I'm really interested in. But I was just saying to Paul before, like the whole Blood Angels box set that's coming out, and that looks really, really nice. But do
It's
I really want to start another Space Marines army? I don't.
Yeah.
I
it
want to stick with something different
at
because
least it is quite different from Imperial Fists, right?
it
So
is,
like
yeah.
Imperial Fists are your, go up, take and hold, and your army dynamics really encourage standing on objectives, holding them, being
Yeah.
resilient, while
Mhm.
Blood Angels are like pedal to the metal, let's go, I'm gonna try to table you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's a
So
completely different play style, but I'm like, but it's still just Marines, and
it is just Marines. It is just
Mhm.
Marines.
I'm like, if I'm gonna play, I want to play something that's different, a
Mhm.
Yeah.
little bit different.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I've gone with. So for some reason, I've gone with Votan.
Very cool.
Yes,
Hey,
yes.
Votan
I
it's
I
cool,
love
man.
the
They're
models in
cool.
there. I
Cool
have
models.
I really believe that in the right hands, they are a good army. My hands may not be the right ones, but I'm confident that they can be played well. I know Davey plays them. Um,
I've been traumatized by him multiple times of like he in our social circle when Davey just started to really get the hang of O10, and he's like a monofaction guy, although he'll toy around with some stuff like, so this series, like he's playing Grey Knights,
Mhm.
and then Grey Knights are just epic, and
oh, that's
frankly I
another one
can't
I've got.
remember the last time I beat him. It's that annoying. It's just like,
Oh.
oh yeah, it's just like nah. And then but Votan literally our like kind of inner circle friend group are like, stop breaking Votan. It's not fun because he would just leaf blower us off the table. And yeah, it's, I mean, do you guys watch, Tabletop Live or,
Sometimes.
War Games Live? Man, I've digested so much of that content when I was getting into it just to go,
Mm,
what are these rules? This is
Yeah.
so
yeah.
intimidating. Like ninth edition, you needed like 4 books to play the game.
Yeah.
Like someone to go,
Mhm.
oh, well, I can do this out of Psychic Awakenings. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
Like the game is so intimidating to get into.
It's yeah.
Ah,
It's a terrifying game to first pick up and read the rules and then be like, okay, how the hell am I actually going to do this? And then if you sit down and you watch some people play or you watch some battle reports, that can also just really scare the hell out of you because you're like,
yeah,
how do they remember any of this?
yes, yeah, big time.
And how many dice am I really going to need to play this game? 'Cause
All of them.
All of them, all the dice.
you can
Yeah.
never have too many.
Yeah.
I found like War Games Live, which is my favorite. I mean, even though
Mhm.
sometimes it's not the most competitive, but let's just listen to hear Joe yammer away, and
Mhm.
it's just such a good, some great content, and the visually it's gorgeous. Like he's so thematically inclined. Tabletop Live is, obviously, big soft spot for those guys because
Mhm.
of, they're Canadian, and
Mhm.
John and Andrew are great guys, and just drive everywhere and just to showcase Canadian 40K content.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I found watching these battle reports when I first started getting into it, and even now, it was just neat to go, oh, that's how heroic intervention works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that's how a feel no pain
Mhm.
roll works
Yeah.
when after you make your, like, there was stuff that I didn't know when I was getting into this that I'd pay attention to go, oh, okay. Or like
Mhm.
someone would use a strat, and then I'm like, I didn't even know, like, what? That's how it works. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's where and still do. Like, I don't know, I haven't played against Dark Angels yet, right? They have a pretty good list right now with
Mhm.
the, triple, Dark Wings and the Inner
Yeah.
Circle Companions and those Deathwing Knights. I mean, so just to either hear like a guy like Innes Wilson on Stat Check talk about a whole battle report with his, Dark Angels, or seeing them play on like WTC on one of them, like
Mhm.
Glasshammer or War Games Live or Tabletop Live, and just to go, oh, okay, this is the damage they can do. Oh, like 5 of those could kill a knight. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, 2 damage, and then they reroll blah 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 blah, like +1. Like it's because at the end of the day, like 40K is like a knowledge-based math hammer game.
Mhm.
How much
Yeah.
knowledge do you have on your army and the other army? And you commit or undercommit or just commit enough, and that means you getting, the most out of all your chess pieces, sort of. So
That's one of the things that I've noticed watching the battle reports or even going to tournaments and being like, oh, this person's playing a list that's not in the meta right now. It's
Mhm.
not at the top of the tables or something, and they're still destroying opponents.
yeah,
They're still
oh yeah,
doing really
Yeah.
well. Like it's the whole idea that I found is that an army is only as good as the person playing it. It doesn't really matter how bad, quote unquote, their rules might be. If that
yep.
person knows their way around those rules, they can still do a ton of damage
Mhm.
and score a lot of points.
Honestly, it is knowing all that, and knowing that's why these Art of War guys like Ennis Wilson, I don't know if it was on a dare, but I just bring
Mhm.
him up again because it's a great example about using any army. He entered a GT with Gene Stealer cults, and he
Mhm.
won it. And their Gene Stealer cults are definitely the bottom of the table,
Yep.
but he knows the math of the maximum output of his army. And he is so, because he coaches and all that other great stuff, is like full-time
Okay.
guy.
Mhm.
So he also then knows all the math of each unit you're going into. So, you know, like Paul Scott, we walk up into a tournament, we move our tank or our 5 infantry guys into this
Mhm.
tank. Maybe we know the stats of that tank. We go, okay, I think it could probably kill this, maybe not. There are these, I'd call them essentially professional players who know, like 80% chance I'm going to kill this with this. So I'm only going to put this much into it. Well, we
Uh,
did, and that is the difference between, what the 3 of us play, like we're
mhm.
still essentially, we're casual players, we're not professional players.
Yeah.
And then,
Mhm.
that next step up of guys who coach and do all that other stuff. And they just, the math is crazy. They just know that. Jade McCartney, a local player here in Durham. He's one of the few guys I know who he's also actually our coach for our team. The other guys is ending a team into the Studs or Snotling team event. It's like 8-man teams. I
Awesome.
highly encourage if you guys ever get 6 buddies together or enter a 5-man team or even a 3-man team, do it. Team 40K is so fun. But
Okay.
I mentioned Jaden because he's one of the few local guys I know where he knows so much about so many other armies that he kind of knows that math. And that's why
Mm,
he's like, I don't want to play in this tournament. I'm just going to essentially coach you guys and try to guide the matchups and stuff. It's a really rare, like you have to have that brain that just absorbs that stuff,
Mhm.
right.
and Jaden, like he's got other stuff to do. This ain't his full-time gig, but he's clearly got that brain to do it. So but teams, man, you guys ever get a chance to play it? Do so. There's a lot of Derek Towns and a buddy of Davies
Mhm.
started 3-man teams up at the Tabletop Forge, and it took off. A lot of people have been copying it. You know, 2 of you play with a third
Yeah.
person, um, and it's a blast because win or lose, your games count, and you just
Okay.
collectively put your scores together.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
So if one wins, the other one loses, but it's not too bad, and the other one's a draw, well, you probably won the round, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
even though you got dummied, if you scored a few points, even though you could have got destroyed, like absolutely destroyed, but you still scored a few points, your team wins.
Nice.
That's
I
awesome.
highly encourage you guys if you ever get a
That'd be a lot of
chance,
fun.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
play in a team
sure.
event. It's super cool, man. Yeah, we're very
Very
cool.
cool.
That's a really cool idea.
So, how do you approach list building? Or maybe I should ask, like, how did you approach it when you first got back into 40K, and how do you approach it now?
When I first got back into 40K, I had no idea. And in ninth
Mm,
edition, there were like slots. So there was like you had to
yeah,
build this and this. So
the
I think there
force
was like
organization chart.
force, yeah,
Yeah.
like heavy and support, I
Hmm.
think, and infantry and battle, and you had so many characters you could take and what have you. Um, and then you started to like, to me, there's a couple of like kind of fundamental things now I look at it. Before I didn't really know what I was doing. I just like, hey, you have, you have your guys who can kill, you guys who can
Hmm.
score, whatever. Now because bliss building is fairly wide open, um, the first thing I do when I go into an army is to go, okay, well, what is your army based off of? So, like for instance, Chaos Cults, this army that I'm playing with, it's a very fast army. So the
Hmm.
attachment rule gives a +2 to move to any chaos or damned units, basically like cultist units.
Hmm.
But it's based around 3 bricks of a curse cultist. So they're very fast, melee oriented bricks that go up and just kill anything, kind
Hmm.
of. They can bounce off stuff, but so I'll start with that. That's my the first thing I'm gonna kind of invest my points in. So let's say I have 700 points invested in these 3 units, 3
Hmm.
characters and 3 they're going to attach to. Well, now I got to figure out, okay, what's going to score? What can I deal with, say, tanks? Do I have anti-tank stuff? Um, these Curse Cultist bricks can kind of go into anything. They're really great into infantry or, multiple units. Maybe they can take down a knight, maybe not. Um, do I have something that can screen out my home objective, right? Or
Hmm.
and just basically camp on it without costing me too many points. Do I have fast stuff that can, score me points? What happens if all my big bricks died? Can I still kind of win the game? Like, how many pieces do you have? I like personally playing with a lot of pieces of game, like a rhino. And then my current list, I don't totally need a rhino. It's not essential. I'm not hiding something in it that's going to pop out and get you. But I just use it as a launching platform that Chaos Cultists can jump out because then they can
Hmm.
move 3 inches. They can
Hmm.
move 6. And I can add another 2 because of their attachment rule.
Hmm.
So that's 11 inches. And then they can do an action because that's just a normal, like, full move of 11 inches. The rhino
Mhm.
itself, it's only 65 points, can move that 12 inches, it can go do something, right? Like, do a cleanse,
Right.
go sit on an objective. So, now I approach list building in a kind of balanced way. I used to, and I'm, you know, without kind of referring to any old ninth edition lists, I'm sure it was what is the most killy stuff?
Hmm.
How can I table, my opposition? It's really hard to win that way. And now in Pariah Nexus, because of the like it's a choice that you can build a list to table your other opponent, but it generally is very difficult to
Yeah.
win that way. You have to score points. You can't have just massive bricks of, death, because honestly, well, David with Grey Knights is a great example. Someone who can just zip around the board, stay largely uninteractive with you,
Mhm.
he's just going to score more points than you. And if you
Right.
can't catch him, you can't kill him, and the terrain's, provided it's a competitive tournament, terrain is like
Mhm.
standardized, not Planet
Mhm.
Bowling Ball. Um, it's sort of you got to score points. It's nice to kill the other guy, but you still got to score points.
Mhm.
So how I look at now with Pry Nexus, I think there are a lot of cards in the Pry Nexus deck that can be stopped by your opponent because there are kill cards such as like Assassinate, so maybe they hide their guy.
Yep.
Right.
Bring it down. Hey, maybe you only have a Rhino on your list like I do, or
Mhm.
one tank like a Vindicator and a Rhino. So bring it down is not going to be great. Um, Call the Horde is a card where you're just trying to kill a big blob of 20 models or a big blob
Mhm.
of infantry with at least 25 wounds. And then there's other kill secondaries like, overwhelming force,
Mhm.
no prisoners, but that's like natural. The first thing I do on my list is, when I put this together, can I perform 4 or 5 different cards turn one, no matter what? And these are area denial.
Okay.
So that means, can you get up into that middle objective or the middle
Mhm.
of the board? 'Cause sometimes, I think generally there's always a middle objective now.
Mhm.
So you get up in the middle objective. If you go turn one, are you able to reach it? Right? Can you be within 3 inches of the center objective? It's worth 5 points. It's crazy. There aren't a
Mhm.
lot of cards that give you 5 points for just being there,
Moving.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Area denial is one. Containment is the best card to me in the Pry Nexus now, because you just have to have 2 units that move like on opposite directions out of your deployment turn one, be just outside of your deployment zone and within 9 inches of an objective edge. Like, so
Yeah.
one
Mhm.
goes left, the other one goes right.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. That's a
and you get
great
six
card.
points. Yeah, you
It's
get six
such a
points.
good
It's
card.
crazy.
Yeah.
Now it's an action, but you scored at the end of that your turn. You don't
Mhm.
sabotage and recover assets. These are
You gotta
cards now that
survive. Yeah.
if you have to survive, and if the guy kills you, you're stuck with that card.
Yeah.
And then you're either spending a CP to draw it again, or you're trying it again, which is never keep cards. Like I rarely ever keep cards. And then extend battle lines and secure no man's land.
Mhm.
Those are other 2 5-point cards that you have to be able to do turn one to give yourself the best advantage possible. If you can get onto 2 objectives in no man's land turn one, if you can't, you're starting with one arm tied behind your back. And extend battle lines. Like, obviously everyone should be able to be on their home objective and touch no
Mhm.
man's land objective turn one. However, if you have just 5 huge tanky units and you're doing that with one of them,
Yeah.
do you
Mhm.
have a 70-point unit of bikes or some cultists or some termagants or homagants or,
Yeah.
some cow breach, or just anything that's just like a little crappy unit that can go up and do that? And can you do that multiple times? Like, for me, I think ideally having about maybe 6 chaff pieces, meaning that you don't care if they die.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So 6 relatively fast chaff pieces is like a must for me. My Chaos Cultist list right now, I have 3 Chaos Cultist mobs. They can move up to 8 inches. It's great.
Nice.
Um, and they're 50 points. So they're cheap. I got a
Perfect.
Rhino, 65 points, can move 12 inches. And I got 2 bikes, which are 70 points and also move 12 inches. So they can, I get some Nurglings. They can't do actions though. They just exist.
Mhm.
But there's 6 cheap things that I don't care if they're not shooting or engaging. They can go up
Right.
and do an action, and if you lose them, it's okay. So
Mhm.
and also, you keep them too, right? You don't just expose your cultists. I'm going to hide them until turns 3, 4, 5 if they're not doing anything. Oh, I'm able to do containment with them now, or I'm able
Mhm.
to extend battle lines with them, or whatever. So, and then the rest of the list build is really like flavorful stuff. What do you like?
Yeah.
What's working? I look for, and everyone does this. What's the best data sheet? So sort of bang for your buck. And then you go, okay, either you're at least taking one, maybe you're taking three. Like right
Mhm.
now in Chaos, Space Marines Vindicators are excellent. I've toyed with playing with three.
Mhm.
Maybe sometimes three is too much because there's a lot of anti-vehicle stuff out there.
Mhm.
The Curse Cultists are very efficient. Cultist mobs are good. Bikes are good. Nurglings for what they do, cheap, good. So often I'm taking 2 or 3 of each, and I can just go, okay, great. I can score objectives. I can fight the guy. I'm not going to table anyone with my current list, but I'm able to tie them up and score more points,
Yeah.
and or push them back and score more points, and you win, a majority of your games that way. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's really great. And I'm happy that you're talking about scoring the points, because that's something Paul and I have talked about in the podcast, is that it always comes down to, if I lose a game, it's because I'm getting too wrapped up in I've got to kill them. I've got to take care of them. I've just got to wipe them out. It's causing me too much problems. And that's where I start to ignore what my secondaries are, where my primaries are at. And it just turns into a firefight, which inevitably I lose the game. So
Maybe not with
really,
Votan now. Votan is
maybe
pretty
not. We'll,
good in a firefight.
we'll
Yeah,
see.
they got some good shooting.
Yeah.
But this really interesting that you're saying, like, on turn one, what happens? It sounds like that's like a perfect scenario if you get turn one and you go first.
Yeah.
How do you kind of pivot to oh shit, I'm
Two
going
crappy
second
cards.
now, and I've got crappy cards. Like,
So
how does that play into things? Because that can also just completely throw you off your game.
100%. So I stage so that they can score it, but also not expose them, so they just easily die. I might expose one of these things because it's really important. I go, if I don't go first, oh well, I lost 10 cultists, or I lost whatever. But for the most part, if I don't go first, I've at least staged so that, okay, I look at my opponent. If he or she moves a certain way, probably can't get lines of sight on. I don't want my scoring chaff dying easily or needlessly. So I always measure to where they can get containment. Does this unit wholly get across outside of my deployment zone? And can I hide them in a certain way to do it? So it's good to measure. And then turn two, you might still draw those cards. And if they're not there, you can still do it. You can stage. But having all these little, to me, having these little chess pieces where you may not know what you're going to do with them when you put them in the list, but you will see as the game progresses, you go, oh, I have this extra little guy. He has 1 OC or 2 OC. He's only a little separate dude, a little cheap character or something. But he can deep strike. So awesome. You know what? I'm gonna deep strike him in turn 3 and do establish locus and get me 4 points. And then maybe he gets me behind enemy lines. So if you don't go first and you don't draw these cards, you have these pieces that you don't have to engage with. Sometimes you don't even engage your opponent for, the first turn. You just hide and score your points and stage and get ready to do, whatever it is. Move blocking as well with these chaff pieces is another key element of having lots of these, where you go, okay, I went second. They're not scoring, but I really don't want this huge melee unit to come in and just wipe me out. I'm going to move my little crappy 10-man cultists. I'm going to move them right behind a building. They're going to be here. And that's who that person's going to have to charge first. And then if they do that, oh, well, I'm going to get to charge them. So, or I move bikes like 1.1 inch away from this person's, big tank. They probably don't want to overwatch because, well, maybe they kill 1 or 2 bikes. But now that bike's there, and then most that tank can do is move a smidge, and it's not coming up any closer. Yeah, I'm going to lose my bikes, but I've kept that tank back there for a few turns, or maybe 1 turn at least, and that just puts that person, behind. So move blocking with those chaff pieces, if they're not scoring, is another good thing. So you do want fast chaff pieces. Slow ones kind of suck.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I have had some success with that, with my Votan list going into some custodes.
you just move block them like crazy.
I just moved blocked. And then I was like, I'll take my little warriors, my little 5 block warriors, put them right down in front. Everybody else can move back and move away. And now you've got to deal with these 5 little guys.
Yeah. It's really hard to charge from like 11 inches away because they only got to move up to this spot,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. But it's a fine art. Like, honestly, it just takes reps and when someone's done it quite good to you, because you just look and go like, I can't go anywhere. Like, where's this board? Playing against a good Drukhari player, they're very good at it, where they just throw so many pieces up there and you just go, you can't do this, can't do this. You're stuck there. Okay, maybe it might kill them, but meanwhile, I'm scoring all the primary and I'm scoring my cards.
Right.
Right. So maybe I'm tabled at the end, but I've scored 95 points and you scored 80. I won,
Yeah. For me, I remember my first tournament at Critical Hit. There was my first exposure to WTC terrain,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
it has it's got kind of strict rules to it with the footprints and the
Yeah.
ground floor being line of sight blocking and all that stuff. And I totally got boxed in turn 1 by my opponent, who was playing Space Wolves, and they just kind of blocked me into my deployment zone. And I'd brought a big Land Raider and a Repulsor Executioner, and I was like, okay, these
I'm unstoppable.
yeah,
These tanks,
and they're
these
parked.
scouts are standing in the way.
Yeah. It's it was enlightening for sure.
It's humbling. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, but
having units that can infiltrate is
Mhm.
also like, so, Black Templars, for instance, there's a lot of charging and melee going on. You
Mhm.
want to get your sword brethren or anyone else into, you want to get Helbrechts into something, right?
Yeah.
Um, having scouts, for instance, who can infiltrate
Mhm.
and maybe make sure that the other opponent, okay, maybe I might lose them, but you chuck them up there and your opponent
Mhm.
then also can't put his annoying infiltrating unit into you and then
Yeah.
charge your repulsor executioner. And you just learn that, like, that comes with reps. But man,
Yeah.
that having at least one infiltrating unit that you're not afraid to throw away
Mhm.
is indispensable. Because
Yes.
if you can move block a big kill unit that's going to come tag you on turn 1 or 2, or more annoyingly, like what happened to you,
Mhm.
some scout unit comes up, like a Space Wolf Scouts comes up and starts 9 inches away behind a building. Can't see them. They
Yeah.
move up a little and then they charge your repulsor executioner, and you're like,
Tied
well,
up.
tied up like for a whole turn, and I can't,
Mhm.
you could move over them, but on 1 or 2, when you fall back, it might blow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, once like move blocking and really taking advantage of that is definitely a next level
Mhm.
skill. And once
Yeah.
you've mastered that, you're really playing on a next level. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Cool.
I like that you mentioned the whole infiltrate thing, because that's another part where I think you and I had conversations when you were gracious enough to play a game with me and kind of walk me through some list building tips and stuff like that. The idea of trade-offs of don't be afraid to lose a unit. Like
yeah,
getting it out there. I know you've spent time painting it. I know you've spent the money on it. I know it's taking up points in your army, but don't be afraid to lose it. It's one of those things where think of the long game. Don't think of just this turn being the entire game type of
yeah,
thing. It's
yeah.
hard. It's
It
hard to get
is. It is.
over.
Yeah, like but I spent so much time on these guys. Yeah, I
Yeah.
named
Yeah.
them. They're amazing. But yeah, being able to just pick up, going, yeah, it's okay. Well, just put them aside.
Yeah.
It's funny. Local player and a teammate from Mid Table Terrors, Mike Emery, has the best attitude where he's like, died. Like no, like I think I'm a little bit like that too. But he's still like party. Goes like, oh man, this thing blew up. But Mike, just the best attitude I've ever met, of just like, oh well, that died. Like gone. It happens, and he's a gorgeous painter, so you would have a natural attachment to him. But he's like, no, that
Yeah.
unit's dead. So yeah, it's true. You have to be ready to say it's a noble sacrifice. These
Mhm.
scouts are going to get ground up by this. It's your job, boys. So
It's your job.
welcome to the Imperial, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the emperor? Question
For the
mark.
Emperor. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So how do
Awesome.
you how when you're entering a tournament, do you actually go in and see what everybody else's lists are and then start to formulate kind of a plan of attack to deal with that? Or are
You
you
mean
pretty
after you've submitted your own list, kind of thing?
yeah, once
Because
you've submitted your lists and they kind of
um
release the rosters and everything like that, do you actually look through them and say, okay, do I have a response to this? Or do you just
um
kind of go in with the confidence of your list?
I think more so I will look at, the problem is like win path is so random.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you could like playing up at that Capital City Bloodbath. I was concerned about Thousand Suns. I was concerned about Dark Angels. And there was some Tau in there. And I ended up playing like Drukhari, Grey Knights twice, Custodes, which was probably my toughest match. Admech, who I'd never played before, and something else. But that was the path I had, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really hard to go, well, if I do go in, like I did have a game plan for playing into T Suns. I, had kind of a tech piece to give me a bit of extra AP because
Mm-hmm.
Magnus saving on a 2-up is really bloody hard to kill. And
Mhm.
um, so I go into some tech pieces, but not a like this list is built to beat this list. It's more of like I like in singles, it's gotta be take all comers or you just won't have success.
Right.
Um, for me, it's more so like I just concentrate on the missions. Like what are the missions? How am I probably gonna set up for them? How am I gonna it's funny, you'll hear a guy like Brad Chester on Death and Glory. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
guys ever listen to that podcast.
Yep.
Death and Glory is actually really good. A couple guys, Brian Horton, Brad Chester, and then they have a couple of guests. Um, um, really good players. Brian Horton is a big tournament organizer, but they'll just sit and shoot the shit, kind of like you guys. Brad's this Chester guy's a really phenomenal player. Not always everyone's cup of tea. The sense of humor is, whatever. I think you guys would have a laugh. But he made a really good point. I was listening to him maybe a year ago or whatever, and he made a point of saying, like, it's amazing when you get to a tournament and you put your army down, you're like, where the hell do I put this? Where do I put my Bland Raider, my Executioner,
Mm-hmm.
and then these guys? How many do I keep off? I don't know where I put these. And he mentioned he will often like, yeah, you play rep games, but he'll go and deploy. He'll just set up his army on a board at home and go, where do I set up? Where do I score those cards turn one? What am I going to keep off the board because it didn't really fit that very well there? And so, that's what I do going into tournaments. Look at the terrain, look at the missions, and think, what am I going to do to set up? Might even, if I feel extra ambitious, and because it's, whether it's GT or like, this, the critical hit RTT this Saturday is 30 people. It's a real good mix of a hell of a bunch of players.
Mhm.
And the train piece is static, right? It's this table 9 for
Yeah.
WTC. So I generally kind of know where I want to set up. I might deploy um maybe before Saturday, like once just to go, okay, do all 3 of my Curse Cultist bricks fit here in this 10-man Terminator brick, or maybe not? Maybe I should just keep, 1 or 2 of these off, whatever. So deployment's huge. That's probably my, for me, that's my game plan. What are the missions? What's the terrain? Do I know how to deploy on them? Yeah, you got to know the opposition armies, but it's really more of a game plan for the missions, right?
Fair
Like,
enough.
hey, how can I score this? Who cares who you play? Well, obviously it's huge who you're playing against, but whoever my opponent is, how am I going to be successful with Purge the Foe or with Terraform or with, whatever it is, and then you just take your opponent as they come.
Right.
Okay.
Now, before we started recording, we had a quick chat, and you mentioned to you there was a point in your playing where, you know, um, the light had switched on. Was that when you turned your mind to just playing the missions and playing the secondaries, or what was that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's sort of yeah, when you start to focus on yeah, playing the missions, playing the secondaries, and playing your game the way you want to play versus just reacting to your opponent. So if
Mm,
you kind of set the tone, you go, well, I'm going to move block this guy. I'm going to move here. And now I know this tank can only go to the left or right of this ruin. So I'm going to have this set up. And I'm going to be set up to score at least a couple cards. I don't know what I'm going to get. Like Davey, for instance, because he has this like, he's got a very good, like he's a real big board gamer, really good
hmm.
strategic mind. He's really good. And I'm very poor at this of thinking, what cards can you score next? And my brain doesn't think that way. Like I
Mm,
sometimes think about it, but he's really good at going, oh, you could get extender area denial. So I think I'm going to put this guy there. You're not going to be able to score that. I'm like, man, like, so when you really start to, think that way, again, I think a little bit about preventing my opponent from scoring, but my rugby addled Cro-Magnon brain is really more about, oh, what can I do next turn? Am I set up? Can I not get shot too badly here?
Right.
Okay, cool. And that's when that light switch is gone to go, okay, I feel pretty comfortable with what I'm doing with my army, not like, oh, what am I going to do next? I know what I'm going to do next. And then you react to whatever your opponent does, right? So,
Nice. Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that perspective of yeah, thinking through what you're going to do
Mhm.
and not getting too bogged down by it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've sometimes been guilty of blowing deployment right away. And then my entire confidence for the game is gone. And I'm like, well, I've lost. And
Yeah.
then it's
it
like, well,
happens.
you're guaranteed to lose because now you've already said you're losing. So
Yeah.
every decision you make is going to be the wrong one type of thing. And the games where I've gone into it and been like, you know what? I'm going to play it the way that I want to play is the ones where I've either won or been extremely close,
Mm,
where it's come down to like the last card of the game. And it's like, oh shit, they got, behind enemy lines and they've already got somebody there, or they've got deployed locusts or something like that. And it's just worked out for them that they score those couple extra points that I couldn't stop.
Yeah. It's funny when that's definitely sort of that click point of when you say, the deployment didn't go well. I just lost 3 units that I shouldn't have.
hmm.
One other thing that kind of clicked off in my head where, I don't know how long ago it was like, don't forget Warhammer 40,000 is a turn-based game.
Yeah.
So, your opponent goes, wipes out an entire unit. You're like, oh, it's a really good unit. But
Yeah.
hopefully, if you've gone, I knew that was going to happen. I've lost that unit. It got me enough points so that I don't feel bad losing it. And now I'm going to be able to, you know, go after them with this. That's definitely a light bulb in your head where you go, it's all right, I've lost that, I knew I was going to lose it, I know the math of whatever's going to happen. And and you go, it's a turn-based game, now I get to do all this other stuff
Hmm.
my turn, and clap back. So even if you end up losing your vindicator, your land raider, and 2 infantry units, go, but you know what, he had to expose a bunch of stuff, and now I'm going to be able to charge him with this and this, and I'm going to get him off primary, I'm going to do this. It's Warhammer 40K, always remembering that's a turn-based game.
Hmm.
It keeps you in it, right? So even when you have
Mhm.
that bad turn, you're like, okay, let's see what I can do, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
one bad turn. It's not the game. It's just
Yep.
one bad turn.
Yep.
Just one bad turn. Very
Unless one
good.
bad turn is I got tabled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've lost everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
why
one
am
bad
I
turn.
why am I rethinking decisions in my
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah.
Why did I commit 10 hours to this? What the
Yeah.
F is wrong with
Yeah.
me,
Oh
right?
man.
Yeah. Well, I'm a loser. Thank God.
Oh
uh,
man. No, that's great. That's good advice. Thank you very much. No, it's great
Mhm.
to see great to get the insights too of someone who's like, jumped into it and worked their way through the competitive side of things.
Mhm.
Um,
no,
to
you
some
get your head
really good
kicked in along the
success.
way.
Oh yeah,
You,
no.
you, you
Looking
know,
forward to it. It's my favorite part. That's why I'm in
Yeah.
the
yeah.
consolation league. Have more laughs that way.
If you guys keep up with this, there'll be, because you guys are obviously keener, you obviously have a
Mm,
mind for this. You will get those jokes of, next, we'll call it next Warhammer season. You guys
mm.
can't call yourself Consolation League. You won this, you
Yeah,
finished here,
yeah,
you did,
yeah,
so. But yeah, it's funny to just go into it as Davey and I do. You just take the piss out of yourselves, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, whatever, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As you said at the start, we're just playing with little figures. You can't
yeah,
take it too
Yeah,
seriously.
you can't.
no,
It's a
no.
game.
It's
I,
toys.
I'll tell you a funny story which I've told a few times. I played in my first league. I joined a league. It was the Durham League,
Hmm.
and my first game was, I'm like, ooh, cool. Like I'm gonna play Chaos Space Marines. I just threw together this list and put it in. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to score. Like, just all right. You have secondaries. You try to get in primary. And my first game, so this was a sort of early to mid ninth edition. I show up from a first game, play who is now a good buddy of mine, Mason Cameron. He shows up with his Eldar, and he is a hell of an Eldar player. And back then in ninth, Eldar had a lot of like really good indirect shooting. And I had all these one wound Terminator or one
Right.
wound World Eater Berserkers and stuff. And so, I put my army, I hide him behind some buildings, and he just starts picking off my army, and just killing this, killing that. And I had a weird list put together, it was just whatever. I think, and that was the game, it was like 100 to 20, right? And he's like, "Hey, sorry, man, my army's really good. It looks like you're just starting out." I'm like, "Hey, no, like zero salt. Like it was fun." I
Yeah.
remember at least charging up and killing something. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, you did it. You killed something." Like, "Yeah, I did it." You lost by 80 points, but that's all right. So game two, I'm like, okay, I'm allowed to change my list, right? Because you lost. I guess you're allowed to change your list back in then. And I'm like, all right. So I've been listening to the Red Path, which is a World Eaters dedicated podcast. They were based out of England, and they got guys all over now. And they're like, "Hey, Karn the Betrayer, he gives reroll hits to anything within like 3 inches. And you can do this and this and this." I'm like, "Oh, cool. You know what? A Lord of Skulls, that totally kicks ass.
Yeah.
It's a big model." So I bought a Lord of Skulls, I painted it up, it was awesome. And because the next round was, 3 weeks later, whatever. And so I had this Lord of Skulls. And that was, I don't know, 500 points your army. Then I had Karn with him, and he's like 150 points, and he gives them like reroll hits. And I had a Dark Apostle that I got and painted. And I think the Dark Apostle gave him like permanent cover and like -1 to hit or something, like to be hit. And then I had a Warpsmith, and a Warpsmith, was this other cool little character that gave him +1 to hit. So it was synergy. All right, cool. Now I'm playing Warhammer, all these synergies. So I had this
Yeah.
cool death brick of this Lord of Skulls with these three characters that are going to hang out next to him. He's just going to go up and annihilate the enemy. And then I had a bunch of other stuff. And I played against Jaden round two. And again, now one of my fast friends, really great guy. And like I said, our coach for our other guys' team. And he was playing Custodes. I'm like, "Oh, Custodes, never played them. Are they any good?" And yeah, they're really good. Like they're fast, they're killy. So these bikes that they had, these, I forget what the hell they're called. He flies up like a squad of 6 of them. They did like flat 3 damage, like 4 or 5 shots each. They turn one, just go up, blow up the Lord of Skulls immediately. I'm like, "Wow, okay, I'll see if it explodes." I rolled a 6. It exploded. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I'll roll for damage on my and Jaden's like, "Sorry, man." I'm like, "Ah, it's okay, whatever." I rolled for my Warpsmith. How many mortal wounds took? Because they all have like 4 or 5 wounds. Rolled a
Yeah.
6. That's dead. Karn rolled another 6. That's dead.
Oh,
My Dark Apostle 6. That was it. It was 4 sixes in a row. The thing blew up and then did 6 mortal wounds to each one of the characters. Just evaporated. That was turn 1 of my second league game ever. Jaden obviously just crushed me. He felt so bad. He's like, "I'm
Oh,
sorry, man. That's really bad luck." I'm like, "Well, it happens,
it
like, what are you gonna
happens.
do?" I did get to play with it a few more times other than that, but it just like that was my first couple games and you can't be salty about it. Just it's a dice
No,
game,
no,
right?
no. It's a
But
dice game.
I remember that years later. Like it's
Mhm.
so fun, man. You play,
Yeah.
get your head kicked in, and hey, maybe you keep playing and you get lucky at a tournament and you get to go play for some uh more tournaments later. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the goal. Are you all set for Atlanta?
yeah, I've got a room booked. I don't have the flight booked yet, and I don't know what I'm going to bring because it's not till November,
Right.
and there'll be a points adjustment then. However, it's it is 2 games Thursday, 2 games Friday, maybe 1 game Thursday, two and two, I think. 2 games Thursday, 2 games Friday,
Oh,
2 games Saturday, and then potentially a cut game Saturday evening, and then another game Sunday. You can play up to like 9 games, something
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
But the games are like essentially 4 hours long. And
Yeah.
because it's GW, even though it's, ultra competitive, they don't like using clocks. They basically say, don't you're not allowed to use clocks. So I'm
oh,
like, and I can be a slow player. I mean, that Ottawa tournament, the first day, the first 4 games are 2.5 hour rounds. I somehow just got through them. but I'm like 4-hour rounds. Oh, I'm gonna bring a list that I'm thoroughly gonna enjoy. Now you don't want to eat
Yeah.
up all your opponent's time, and
Mhm.
apparently they've gone into the Games Workshop who hosts it, will allow you to play a little bit longer, especially if it's like an important game. But
Mhm.
man, you're gonna have at least 2 hours to play your game, right? Just to play your half of the game. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring whatever I want and have the most fun with it and feel comfortable. And you just go and see how the hell you do. And if I get my head kicked in, it's a great experience anyway. So
Oh
That's
man,
amazing. That's a great attitude to have. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
oh yeah.
absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be a blast.
Oh
Four
yeah.
hours, like it's that almost for like such a high level tournament, that's almost like a casual game, right? Where
Yeah.
you're like 4 hours, it's basically like saying, no worries. Like Scott and I play a game in like 3 hours, three and a half,
Mhm.
because we're
Yeah.
talking and goofing around and stuff like that. So that's amazing. It
I
actually
do
sounds.
wonder if there's a big social aspect to it because it does
Mm,
sound like, a lot of drinks on the evenings there
mm,
and you have a lot of chats. It also sounds like the guys are very much talking through all their turns. So everyone's talking through their turns. They're like, I think if I go here, you can't see me if you move there. So each turn does take a little bit longer
Right.
because
right.
of the level of planning and play that they're doing into it.
Mm,
So, so like look, if it's knights versus knights, they're gonna get it done in an hour and a half anyways.
mm,
Mhm.
But if I bring say a chaos cults list with just like a whole bunch of horde, no
mm-hmm.
tanks, just tons of troops, I didn't need that whole 2 hours. Maybe it might
Oh
even
yeah.
dip into the
Yeah.
beyond that because there's no clock. But yeah, it'll be fun, man. I can't
Yeah.
wait. I am curious how I'm gonna package it all up and bring it down there. I've been
Yeah.
told that you put it in your carry-on just in
Yeah.
case. Bring it in your
100%.
carry-on. Yeah, you just
100%.
layer it into your clothes and your carry-on or however the hell you do it and get it down there and yeah, see how it goes. So
Yeah.
Just
You know for
just
sure the security's pulling you aside after you go through the x-ray machine, but
Yeah,
what are
exactly.
these, right? Like, oh,
Have you ever heard of Warhammer?
yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Oh man.
that's amazing.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear about it. I can't wait to hear how it goes. Yeah.
Mhm.
That'll probably be a two-parter, that podcast, that
might be.
episode.
Davey's pretty
Yeah.
efficient. It will be a two-parter for both down there. So
Yeah.
because if he makes it down, which I'm still hoping,
Mm.
then it'll definitely be a two-parter. If it's just me blathering on, we'll probably just hammer through that. But yeah, it'll be good fun. Take lots of pictures, chat all about
Oh
it, share the
yeah.
experience.
Looking
Yeah,
forward
no,
to
it'll be
hearing about it.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This has
Yeah.
been really amazing. Hope to do this again. This has been so informative. As I said at the beginning, you're one of the nicest guys in 40K. So thank you very much
Definitely.
for joining us. And yeah, best of luck down in Atlanta.
Yeah,
My
thanks a lot,
pleasure,
Brian.
guys.
Best of
amazing.
luck.
Gonna see you this Saturday
We'll
anyways,
see you this
right?
Yeah,
Saturday.
exactly.
Ruin and devastation.
Yeah, it's gonna be good fun, man. Can't
That'll be a
wait.
lot of
Yeah.
fun.
All
All
right.
right.